Hello and welcome back to The Measure of Things, a podcast brought to you by STABILA. In the episode today, we are focusing on you, the person in the van, on site, in the workshop, who's maybe always felt a bit different, a bit all or nothing, or who's wondering if ADHD, autism, or something similar might explain why some things can be harder or easier than they needed to be. Today, we're going to look at how neurodiversity actually shows up day to day, why construction seems to attract so many neurodivergent people, how adults are self-diagnosing later in life, and what understanding yourself can do for your mental health. I'm joined by two fantastic guests. We have Sara Hanak, who is an ADHD coach and neurodiversity trainer. And we have Bennett, who is CEO and founder of On Wellbeing and Aspire Software Systems. Did that very briefly. We will get into what those are in a second. So if you've ever thought maybe it is my brain and it's not just me being useless, grab a brew, turn up the volume, and let's get into it. So I'm going to start with you, Dom. I very briefly explained the two businesses. Well, I didn't explain at all.
No.
I introduced the two businesses. Take us through a little bit more what you do and how you got involved in it.
So we're basically a tech company. We have two products primarily, and then we're now about to launch a third with another company, which I'll come on to in a minute. Our first product is Aspire, which is basically a product that supports neurodiverse and disabled people in education and also in workplace via things like access to work, or in the education version is disabled student allowance. And our product basically is there to help neurodiverse people overcome the barriers that they face because of a diagnosis. So if it's a dyslexic student, how can we help that individual become better at dealing with organisational challenges? Or if it's a student with ADHD, how can we help that user become better at dealing with procrastination or retention, etc. We've always offered mental health and wellbeing support. So our next sort of step was to look at building a workplace mental health platform, which is where we launched On Wellbeing. So that is a behavioural science-backed mental health app that we sell primarily into businesses to support with employee mental health. And more recently, we are about to launch a product with On the Tools, which is called On the Tools Card, which is basically a deals and discounts tool, as well as supporting the trade with mental health and wellbeing support. Hopefully that covers everything. Quite a lengthy...
Yeah, there are definitely bits I want to get into. I'd maybe just start some of this that, we got introduced through Lee from On the Tools. And actually part of that introduction was based on a podcast recording we did last year that was focused all around mental health, but slowly started to uncover the link there between neurodiversity that we'll come on to a little bit later. But it's interesting. There's two core parts or product offering that you guys do that is in both camps. I mean, did that come out of there being an obvious link between the two, or just the support people need around mental health and access to support is similar to neurodiversity?
I mean, for me, the two are the same things ultimately, and we know statistically people with a neurodiverse diagnosis are more likely to experience mental health challenges. We've always offered mental health and wellbeing support as part of our platform, but my view is that workplace wellbeing support is falling short, and there's loads of reasons for that. So for us, the most natural step was to try and make sure that we were offering a tool that was going to be able to support all employees rather than just those with a diagnosis that can get support via things like access to work. And then obviously the On the Tools stuff has come about because of the horrific stats around mental health within the construction sector. Again, we want to make something that is accessible to the trade as a whole. How can we do that? There's no one better placed than On the Tools, I don't feel, to make sure it reaches the market. Obviously, we've got a proven mental health and wellbeing app that we feel can really support. So we've kind of joined forces to do exactly that, I guess.
Yeah, I think On the Tools are a community. That's their superpower. Is it is a community that's there for people, and just something I'll mental note to come back to later on is that support structure that's in place around community and the people around you. And also the point you said there that I think is really powerful, that you don't have to have a diagnosis, whether it's a mental health diagnosis or a neurodiversity diagnosis, to seek and access help and support.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep saying that.
Yeah.
So we've got some structure. Sarah.
Hello.
What do you do and how did you get involved in it?
So I am a neurodiversity coach and trainer. I started working about 15 years ago in a UK university, and I was working in disability, but particularly neurodivergence. And one of the things that we would do is screen students who thought they might have ADHD. And I went to do my first kind of screening test with a student and looked down the list and thought, oh, am I allowed to swear?
You can swear, yeah.
Okay.
It means we have to put a little E next to it, but it's for tradespeople. I think they're used to a few swear words. You're all right.
And I went down the checklist and thought, oh shit, every one of these applies to me. And up until that point, I had absolutely no idea I was neurodivergent. It wasn't something that was on my radar. I knew that I'd had a very squiggly career. I did okay at school. I was one of those kids that was always kind of singing, dancing, doing every extracurricular activity going. But I'd done okay. And then in the workplace, I kept changing careers every few years. I'd get bored, I'd move on to something else. I'd get excited about something new and shiny elsewhere. And I'd been self-employed in various different ways up until that point. And then I kind of realised that, oh, I wonder whether this does apply to me then. But I kind of filed it in the back of my brain and thought, I'll come back to that. Can't really think about that now. And as I went to do more and more work in the neurodiversity field, I recognised that I definitely do have ADHD and went on to get diagnosed. But in the meantime, I was doing more and more work specialising in ADHD and autism particularly, but neurodiversity in general. I then moved on to another university specialising in neurodiversity. And after a couple of years, I would get a lot of students who would come back to me because they said it feels like you understand my brain and the way it works. And essentially I was doing more and more kind of coaching style work and decided to embrace that and go self-employed as a neurodiversity coach and trainer. So that's kind of how I came to be in this position. So about 15 years of working in the neurodiversity field, but also recognising that a lot of what we know about neurodiversity, we think about the fact that somebody with ADHD might struggle with things like memory and, timekeeping and organisation and those kind of things. But often what's overlooked is that there are emotional regulation challenges that can come with that as well, which I'm sure we'll kind of touch on later. But I think with most neurodiversity, there's a lot that isn't fully understood until you start to learn more about it. So there's lots of people who only recognise that they might be neurodivergent themselves, maybe when their child gets a diagnosis or when a friend of theirs says, do you know what, I've got ADHD. Do you think maybe you might have it as well? Because I've noticed this, this and this. I think we've got quite a long way to go in terms of awareness, but it is certainly coming on a long way from where we used to be. So
starting point on that point of awareness, we've said neurodivergent, neurodiversity, dozens of times already, which is fine because that's what we're here to talk about. But in everyday language, what are we talking about? What ADHD, autism, dyslexia, what else? What else is there?
So neurodivergence is basically the way that different brains work. So everybody's brain works differently. In this room, we will all have brains that work slightly differently. But the sort of types of neurodivergence that we're generally looking at is things like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. You're going to ask me what all of these mean now, are you?
I mean, it depends how long we've got, but I suppose what I'm interested in, and I think people listening would be is, I know that neurodivergence, it's not as easy as saying you are this, you are that. Yes. But just briefly, on those that you've just mentioned, what are a couple of the key traits that I guess people would see manifest in themselves?
Yeah, so in something like dysgraphia, it's about sort of those fine motor skills. With dyscalculia, it's more relating to numbers. With dyslexia, a lot of people think it's about spelling and reading and things like that, but actually there's also difference in processing. So it might be that the processing speed is slightly slower. Things like Tourette's also come under neurodivergence. OCD, which obviously a lot of people are aware of, but maybe don't have that deeper understanding. Actually, it's often an anxiety-based way of coping.
Yeah.
And also you have things like acquired neurodiversity. So that might be where somebody's had maybe a brain injury and it's kind of changed the way that their brain works. So there's a whole really broad, and that probably doesn't cover everything that comes under neurodivergence. But basically, we're looking at the different ways that people's brains work, the different strengths, the different challenges. So there's also a lot of overlap. So a lot of people will have more than one neurodivergence. So things like dyslexia and ADHD and autism, there's often lots of overlap. So often it's about recognising what somebody's strengths and challenges are rather than necessarily worrying about what label to put that under, once somebody has kind of recognised that they are neurodivergent.
Okay. I think that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
Something that I think comes up time and time again is like you will have a perception of what somebody with ADHD are like, or somebody with autism that, they work in a specific way. And I think what you said then, it kind of helps break some of that down. It's not that straightforward, but Dom, I'm interested as you engage with businesses and as you look at businesses that are looking to support people. I think there's always a misconception that if you're neurodivergent, or particularly if you're ADHD, you're scatty and you can't get everything together in your brain. Now, particularly in construction, the vast majority of people that work in construction are self-employed. They're business owners. So there feels to be like a bit of a disconnect, sole trader all the way up to bigger construction companies, with people that are more likely to have a neurodivergent trait somewhere in them, with they're actually running their own business. So, I mean, you interact with quite a few businesses, you're having this conversation. Do you see that? Do you see people struggling with people around them and how they manage it?
I mean, absolutely. I think there's a few reasons why it's more prominent in the construction sector. I'm sure we'll come on to it in a little bit around the whole education thing, and people ended up in the construction sector. They kind of fell into it. I think there's more people in self-employed roles within the sector, and that kind of leads into someone with an ADHD trait, they're kind of in control of their own destiny. That can often come with some downfalls as well, because I'm also ADHD, try and run my own business, and that can come with some, like, I don't really plan anything. I'll make a decision at the click of my fingers, and that doesn't help us from a business perspective. Terrible at doing all the back office admin. But I'm in a really fortunate position. I've got someone that does the total opposite to that and makes sure that I keep on track. And I ask her if this is the right decision often. And so I'm not sure that really answers the question, but I think it's really difficult to say, because we don't really also deal with the smaller businesses in terms of the guys that are self-employed. And we wouldn't really have direct contact with them anyway, because we support via things like Access to Work. So they have to go and get an assessment to support with what their diagnosis is and how that impacts them at work. So they would at that point recommend product services, things like ADHD coaching, etc. So we don't really have direct contact with the smaller sole traders, self-employed individuals. We would be dealing with some of the larger businesses that were looking to support all employees or a significant cohort of their employees. We would see that side of it, but less so on the self-employed sole trader.
Sorry, go on, Sarah.
No, sorry to interrupt. There's a stat actually that I think it's about 18% of people who are self-employed identify as having ADHD. And those are the ones who've recognised it. So, it's really, as Dom says, that that need to be autonomous and to actually be in charge of your own destiny really appeals to lots of us with ADHD, doesn't it? That kind of, that drive to want to do things your own way.
I think that's exactly it. And where I think it's difficult for people in employed roles is that, like, we are in control of our own destiny. Sara, self-employed. I hope you don't mind me saying she's got ADHD as well. Yeah. Like, I'm there to go oversharing your.
No, go for it. Also, oversharing is quite a common ADHD trait.
Yeah.
As you'll find out from Domino.
But like, for me, obviously I'm in a really fortunate position that I do kind of run my own business and I can do those things. But ultimately, like, when I worked in recruitment prior to this, I couldn't just make decisions like that. And you almost become a little bit suffocated. Not suffocated, that's probably a bit of an over-exaggeration, but you can't just decide, well, I'm going to do this today. Because you work for someone, you're being paid to do a specific job. But like, for me, I couldn't ever imagine going back employed into an employed capacity role for more reasons, not just than having the freedom and the ability to make decisions, but for the reasons that we just mentioned. Like, actually, we're doing things as I think that's right. It's not always right, by the way, but I think it certainly helps me with my challenges with dyslexia, well, less so with dyslexia, but certainly with ADHD. I couldn't imagine it any other way.
Yeah.
But I suppose you run a really successful business, and you touched on, I suppose, some of the challenges that you face, and you overcome them with having people around you that help you with that. But there's got to be major strengths with it as well. Otherwise, you kind of wouldn't be where you are.
Yeah, I mean, there absolutely are. Sarah will probably tell you more of the
I feel like this is a job interview.
I know it is. I feel yeah.
Tell about your strengths and weaknesses.
But yeah, like, for me, like, I don't ever think about, and this is also a massive downside. I don't often think about, say we're looking at adding a specific tool to one of our platforms just for simple terms. Like, I'll look at it and think this is going to add real value, and I know it is. And I'll almost think about me as a user. Like, if I was using this, how would this help me, and I kind of look at it like that from that perspective. I don't think, actually, what's the cost implication of this, or what if someone doesn't think like me? I just think, well, tunnel vision, like, let's go and build it, and then we go and start building it, and it's become less of an issue now because Jenny does the total opposite. Who's our head of product, the total opposite to that, and looks at, actually, right, well, I thought about how much this is going to cost, and are we sure that everyone's going to think like you? Well, I'm like, I am sure that everyone's going to think like me, actually. But yeah, like, of course, like, but the ability to make decisions like that, I think, for us as a business, as a small business, is so important, because otherwise you just get 100%. And a lot of businesses, a lot of the bigger businesses, they lose that because there's a process. We've got to do a big market research piece and interview 2,000 people to make sure that this tool is going to be. Well, no, we don't think like that. Like, I think that we should build it. Yeah, we'll look at it, and we'll sit down now and look at the costs, and is it going to support most of our users? Yes, okay, let's go and build it. That, for me, is probably one of my biggest strengths, I think, as a business owner.
And it's giving you that, as a business, that ability to be agile, isn't it? And kind of go, yeah, we can run with this can work. But Dom's there using his strength of actually a bit of impulsivity, some hyper focus, and the passion to actually go, no, we can make this work. Let's make it work. Let's do it. Rather than, seeing it as, a lot of people think kind of things like impulsivity are a negative, and they are in certain situations. But there's also situations where actually just going, yeah, let's just go ahead and do it and worry about how, as we go along the journey, is really valuable. Lots of people don't dare to do that and take that first step because they're too worried about things going wrong. So there's definite strengths to some of the things even that are seen as negative traits or problematic traits. There are times where actually they're really helpful. And loads of people with ADHD are amazing in a crisis situation because actually we'll just act, we'll do what needs to be done. But things that have no deadline, things that are kind of ongoing, quite boring jobs that don't have any inherent interest can be a real struggle. And that's the kind of interesting aspect of it.
I feel like that is a really good segue into the question about the link between neurodiversity and construction.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of tradespeople, the people that are listening, we've all had them in our homes. They're their inherent job a lot of the time is problem solving.
Yeah.
Either in a crisis where things are going wrong and they have to solve a problem, or every time they go into somebody's house or a bigger commercial project, they have to overcome a problem or they have to be creative to come up with solutions. And everything works on deadlines. If anything, for a lot of tradespeople, they'll say time is money. So, if they can get that job done efficiently and quickly and move on to the next thing, that's more money for them.
Yeah.
So it kind of half answers a question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway, because I feel like it's a really important point that doesn't get talked about within construction that much. And recent studies have shown that about 1 in 4 construction workers consider themselves neurodivergent. A separate report that On the Tools did found 52% of tradespeople that were surveyed said they had a neurodiverse condition, most commonly ADHD or dyslexia. So a bit of self-diagnosis in there, but an awareness in people that I suppose they're different. So I'm rambling a little bit, and I'm still going to ask the question for you, Sara, to start with. Like, why do you think there is such a high proportion of people that are working in construction trades?
So I think there's a few factors to that. For one, I think often people have been let down by the school system. If they weren't causing any problems in school, then it would get overlooked. And if they were causing problems in school, then often it was kind of, oh, they're naughty, rather than it being a case of, actually, let's look at what's going on here. Why is this student not able to engage with what we're offering? But also looking at people's strengths. Actually, a lot of people who are neurodivergent are amazing at kind of problem solving, at things like being able to think differently, things like design technology, and being able to actually kind of go, okay, how might that work? People with ADHD are often really good at kind of the big picture. People who are autistic are often really good at the finer detail. So there's lots of strengths that actually naturally lend themselves to this sector of work. But also you've got the fact that lots of people who are neurodivergent think, I don't want to sit doing a boring office job 9 to 5 every day. I want to be doing something. I want to actually do something that feels like it has added value throughout that day, rather than just kind of sitting number crunching. So yeah, I think actually if you've got a varied job where you might be able to be self-employed, you might be going into different people's houses, doing different jobs all the time, and kind of short deadlines where you're working on one job, then moving on to the next. They often play into the strengths of neurodiversity as well. So yeah, and also you've got the fact that some kids will have just been sort of written off at school and will have kind of gone, okay, what's my next step? And actually, often I think the construction industry has been something that people have kind of ended up in, rather than chosen to go, that's what I want to do. Yeah. Which I think there's probably a bit of almost stigma there that needs to change over time, because you can be hugely successful in construction.
I think it's a really important point. We are recording an entire episode to focus on that.
Yeah.
Because we've had college lecturers sat on this couch, and we've had tradespeople sat on this couch, and their experiences at school or with kids that have come through the system tends to be that it's a traditional approach to education doesn't work for everybody. And a lot of people, like you said, they sort of fall into a construction trade, and it seems more and more clear that actually you can apply those neurodiversity traits as a superpower with construction. And there's a friend of mine whose son has autism, and she said to me, as soon as possible, she wants him to pick up tools and to be outside, because she knows he's not going to be doing geography at A level. As soon as possible, he will want to be outside. He's creative. He wants to have things in his hands. And I feel like the system isn't necessarily set up for that. I don't know if you've had a similar experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think the education system, we're not going to fix it today on this podcast, but I think it's so broken for anyone who's not neurotypical. So I think for that reason, people do end up in things like the trade because they feel like they're not going to fit in going to university, which is just absolutely ludicrous. Because obviously if they were tested or assessed on things like being creative or building something or whatever it would be, then they'd excel. Obviously you've got to get a C in maths and a C in English and a C in English literature. Like, I'm sorry, but when was the last time anyone used English literature or even maths for that? I'm not saying maths isn't important, of course it is, but I think the whole education system, the way that we are assessed, and it was the same for me. I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in college, so I kind of got all the way through to 16 without having any. It just might be a bit slow at reading or a bit thick. So then the answer was, well, give him 25% extra time. Well, that was like the worst possible thing for me. It's just another 25% extra time to realise I wonder how badly I've actually done in this exam. Like,
it's not going to make you go.
No, not going to get me an A, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But if they'd have, like business, for example, or whatever it would be, like actual practically go and do this, then that would have made a massive difference. And you think about that in every kind of, every subject, I think, in school, even maths and English to a degree, like, everything is just going sitting in a 2-hour exam. Well, no one with ADHD or dyslexia is going to succeed in that position.
I think there's also that element of it's not interesting, it's not engaging for students, is it? You know, you're learning things by rote to regurgitate them in an exam. How's that helping anyone for a future career? It doesn't seem to. Somebody
said to me a while ago, the current school system is just a memory test.
Yeah.
And it's if you've got a good memory, you'll do really well in school academically. If you don't have a very good memory, then you're going to struggle in some capacity. So it's very, very linear and very limiting.
Yeah.
Dom, are you seeing businesses wake up to neurodiversity and wake up to mental health a little bit more? You know, is it something they're doing because they know they can harness the power of their people better if they're helping and supporting them with neurodiversity and mental health? Or is it something that people are paying lip service to?
I think certainly with neurodivergent, like, so we have two totally different businesses. One of which is Aspire. So that is funded via things like Department of Workplace and Pensions, the Department for Education, access to work, grants, etc. So, and also from a business owner's perspective, if someone comes forward and says that I've got ADHD or dyslexia or whatever it is, they have to provide reasonable adjustments for that individual. They've not got a choice, which obviously is 100% right. Of course it is. And then that individual can either be funded via their organisation privately if they don't want to go down the access to work route, if the organisation doesn't want to go down the access to work route, or that individual can go and get an access to work assessment or a workplace assessment. And they will at that point find out what software can be suitable. They can get things like transport to and from work paid for by Department for Workplace and Pensions. So all those things within workplace, organisations have to provide that support. They've not got a choice. That is also available for self-employed people. Anyone that works in the UK can get things like access to work. When it comes to mental health and well-being, I don't think businesses are doing enough. And that's not just construction businesses, that's businesses across the country. There's far, far too much focus put on things like EAPs and one-to-one counselling support. We know that people don't engage with them. The average engagement levels in EAPs across the country, last time I checked, was about 3%, between 3 and 5%. Well, we know that mental health challenges are about 25% of the working your workforce. So there's a pretty big difference there of between 3 and 5% and 25%. But an organisation will just say, well, we've got an EAP. Well, good for you, but I know. Oh, by the way, we've had conversations with businesses. Yeah, no one actually uses the EAP, so our team must be doing really well. It just doesn't work like that. And so I think it's still sadly just a bit of a box ticking exercise. I'm not saying for every business in the country, because I don't think it is. A lot of businesses, it is a box ticking exercise. We offer an EAP, and we've got Simply Health, whatever it is, or not, well, whatever it is, and those things are massively useful. We have things like that, but there has to be ways of reaching the hard to reach. How can we make sure that whatever we're offering our staff is wide reaching, is accessible, has totally removed the fear of judgment? And they're the things that I think capture the people that are actually really struggling. And that's, I think, where the challenges for businesses, they don't see a direct return on investment. You're a finance team and you think of a construction business that minimum wage has gone up and an eye's gone up and all these things that have impacted ultimately the bottom line. And then you're saying, actually, you need to go and pay whatever amount of money to go and support their employees' mental health. Well, they're not getting a 5x return on investment, despite what the Deloitte and McKinsey study says. You are ultimately in the long run, but you're not going to get, you come and buy whatever the platform it is and you spend £1 per employee, you're not going to get £5 back. I'm not going to come to the end of the year with £5 for, and that I think is the challenge. So yes, with neurodiverse people that are coming forward and expressing they've got a challenge, I think less so with mental health and wellbeing. But yeah, I think
there's an interesting piece there as well about the fact that there is so much undiagnosed neurodivergence that is showing up as mental health challenges. So people that are struggling with their mental health, I've worked with so many people who had maybe started university with a diagnosis of anxiety and depression, but actually had undiagnosed neurodivergence, and they've only recognised that at the point where they've been at university and maybe a friend has pointed it out, or they've really struggled with living away from home with strangers and that kind of thing. But the overlap between the two, you can't separate them out. A lot of people who are neurodivergent will struggle with their mental health, and actually recognising and getting diagnosed or self-diagnosis can really help with that, because it gives you a lens through which to understand yourself. And I think that's an area where for businesses, it's a little bit of a challenge almost, because actually they might have someone that's presenting as struggling with their mental health who has maybe 6 sessions of CBT that doesn't necessarily resonate with them, doesn't necessarily get the results they're looking for, because actually it's relating to undiagnosed neurodivergence. And as an employer, it's kind of, well, what do you do with that? Where do you go with that? Other than, if the employee wants to go to the GP and try and go down that route, it's going to take a long time to get diagnosis. But actually, if somebody recognises that they think they might be neurodivergent and they come to an employer and say, I think I'm neurodivergent, you have to put reasonable adjustments in from that point. So if you've got, if there's an audience listening here who think they might be neurodivergent, it is worth mentioning that to your employer, because they will need to put reasonable adjustments in at that point, regardless of whether you've got a formal diagnosis. But also, just understanding more about neurodivergence can give you a lens through which to understand some of the struggles that you might be experiencing.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think the last point there, I think, is so important. Like figuring out, I don't think it's necessary for everyone to go and get like ADHD. People think, well, I'm going to go and get Ritalin from a GP. Like, also, that won't help a lot of it. People with ADHD, like I've spent some time with Sara, and Sara was like, kind of given me a bit of free coaching really, because we've done a few bits of work together, and it's making me understand what ADHD is for me, or how it's likely to impact me, so I can then figure out, well, what safeguarding can I put in place to make sure that isn't impacting my work or the business ultimately. And I think that is so important for an individual to understand if they feel like they've got ADHD, like, well, how is that impacting you? And what can you do to try and make sure that it isn't going to have a negative impact on your work, and you are able to harness it, I guess, in the right way. I think that's so important. Yeah,
one of the big ones, I think, for a lot of people is around rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So that is basically a very intense emotional reaction to real or perceived criticism, and it shows up a lot in the workplace, and often people don't really recognise that that's what's happening. But it might be that, a tradesman goes and quotes for a job and they don't get the job, but they don't really get any feedback as to why. That might feel really intense, and there might be quite a big emotional reaction to that inside, kind of ruminating on it and thinking, well, why didn't they go with me? I must be really rubbish at my job, or maybe I went too high, or maybe I need to, maybe next time I need to quote less because maybe somebody else came in. And actually, there might be a totally unrelated reason that person has chosen to go with somebody else. It might have been that actually their neighbours use them and they've seen their work, so they know they want to go with them. And they might have just been getting you for an extra quote just to have something to compare it against, But for someone with ADHD, when their rejection sensitivity dysphoria kicks in, that will feel huge and will feel really personal. So kind of taking it as a personal attack when actually there was no criticism there. It just felt like it. That rejection felt really hard to handle. But once you understand rejection sensitivity dysphoria, you can learn to kind of, we call it name it to tame it. It kind of being able to identify that that's what's going on for you allows you to ride that wave more quickly than you might have done otherwise.
I bet there's a lot of tradespeople listening that will resonate with that, and it will happen a lot. That scenario you talked about with quoting. So I'd imagine that and I know some of them, and I know some of their reactions to it, and they get sensitive.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you can put a term to it.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back a little bit of a step around the diagnosis, self-diagnosis versus trying to find out more information. Now, the vast majority of people that will be listening, they don't have an employer. They are the employer.
Yeah.
You know, they work by themselves, which I think is another challenge when it comes to mental health, because you deal with this in isolation.
Definitely.
And even if you're working with other people, you have financial responsibility because you're self-employed anyway. What would that process look like for somebody that's self-employed to seek diagnosis or find out more information?
Yeah, so there's a couple of avenues. It's either a case of going to your GP, and they will usually ask you to fill out a screening test. You can also get lots of screening tests online. The DSM-5 screening test is usually, you can usually track that down somewhere, but there's other companies that, you know, offer private ADHD assessments who will do screening tests online. So you can go through a screening online, and then if you want to, you can either go to your GP and ask to go through either the right to choose or wait on the NHS waiting list. But either way, it won't be a quick process generally. But the other option is to either pay privately or to just read up as much as you can, find out as much as you can about ADHD or other neurodiversity, you know, depending on what neurodiversity you're thinking that you might have. And start to just understand more about it, because often in understanding more about it, you can actually advocate for yourself more anyway. So, you know, as a self-employed tradesperson, potentially, you might be finding that your life is very chaotic at the moment because you're going from customer to customer. You're getting, you know, other customers chasing you as to when you're going to be starting, and you feel like you're on this constant hamster wheel with no ability to sort of slow things down. But actually, it might be that just making sure that you take a lunch break in your van every day where you catch up on messages, get back to people to kind of preempt it, so that you're almost building in time for the admin and things. So it's not backing up, and then you're not getting that repeat, almost the same thing cropping up over and over again because people are chasing you for it. But it also gives you a bit of time and headspace to kind of calm yourself down, to just have a bit of time doing nothing, to let your brain have a bit of a break, to work in a way that works for you. So it might be that you do intense surges of work and then have some downtime and then do another intense surge of work. It might be that, you know, you're struggling with the admin side of things and getting all your invoices out, making time once a week or whatever, or once a day or whatever works for you to find ways to manage that side of things. So you can sort of start to recognise what you struggle with and then put things in place that relate to that are going to help.
So it starts, I suppose, with that self-understanding, doesn't it? And I think, you know, conversations I've had with people around going and seeking a diagnosis is they say, well, what does it matter? Yeah. If I have ADHD, I've always had ADHD, and I'm perfectly happy with how I am. And I think it's getting away from, you get a diagnosis and it's medication. It's not to solve it. It's to gain a better understanding of yourself. And if you've got a better understanding of yourself and strengths and weaknesses, you can turn the strengths into superpowers, and you can put coping mechanisms in for the weaknesses, I suppose.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, there's so much tech. Like, use dyslexia as an example. If there's an individual out there that hates doing the emails or writing quotes or whatever it might be, well, use things like text to speech. Like, don't write a report. Get text to speech to write it for you. If you know what you need to say, then read it. Like, there's so many different things.
So what's that then? Because I suppose like dyslexia, I think will come up time and time again for tradespeople.
Yeah. So I mean, Microsoft inbuilt Word has now a tool you can use, and so does Apple. For example, if you're using your iPhone or iPad, you can use Siri to dictate what you want to say. And it's got pretty good. It's got so accessible now. It doesn't listen to your ums and your. It is so good. I feel, and for a lot of people, from as Sara said, understanding what their challenge is, what is causing any kind of slowages within what you do in your day-to-day job. Is it writing invoices? And then what can I put in place that's free, that's really accessible, that's going to help me with this specific task that I hate doing, but I've got to do it. My business can't afford for me not to write these reports or write these invoices. Well, what can I use that's going to help me with that specific thing? And there is so much tech out there that is, as I say, free, that will do or take a lot of the stress away from you actually having to sit on Word and type out word for word what you need to put. Like, you just don't need to do that ultimately now.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good example of how if you have an understanding of it, you can seek out the support. Something I've noticed, I don't like voice notes.
Yeah.
But we work with a lot of tradespeople. They all love voice notes because they don't have to sit there typing things out. It's quick and easy, and they're not having to worry about it. And it's things like that, again, that it's quite a simple change in what you can do and how you can work that just takes out the problem of typing a text message out.
Yeah. And even things like, listening to voice notes, speed it up to 1.5 and it suddenly becomes a lot easier to listen to, depending on how your brain works. Yeah, exactly.
I hadn't thought of doing that because I do put them on sometimes, and I think this guy's just sat in his van and he's waffling away now, and he's at the traffic lights. He stopped talking.
My dad, we're going off on a tangent a little bit here now, but it's quite a funny story, and hopefully everyone will find it quite funny. He was at mine the other day, and he's pretty useless with tech, and he's listening to a voice note. I'm like, who is that talking? It sounds like someone rapping down. Like, he was like, I can't hear a word he's saying. So I said, what speed is it on? And it was on 2 times. And he just thought he was speaking that fast.
Brilliant.
And he's probably had that setting on the whole time.
He said to me, I've never been able to understand what you're saying to me because I love a voice note, and that's because he's got it on 2 times the speed.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a little bit more about autism as well, because I think we've sort of talked through dyslexia, ADHD, like really well for like tradesperson listening on how that could practically show up and some of the adjustments they could make. When it comes to autism, where like how does that would you see that manifesting itself for a tradesperson, and what are the steps they could take?
Yeah, so again, it varies really. I think you've met one person who's autistic, you've met one person who's autistic. I think it can show up really differently for everybody. Yeah. But I think, common challenges would be things like if you're working on long jobs where you're away from home a lot of the time, and actually that structure that you might have in place at home where, every day feels quite predictable, where you are, who you're surrounded by, all of those kind of things. Suddenly that all changes and you're sent off to different places, staying in different hotels with different teams and different people. And that in itself can be quite dysregulating for a lot of people. So certainly kind of awareness around how those kind of things might impact. And for somebody who is autistic, kind of developing that sense of confidence in advocating for yourself and kind of going, actually, I know that I struggle if I'm in different settings every night. So can I stay in the same hotel if possible for all 3 nights if I'm, on a job from a Monday to Wednesday? Or, can it be that actually if I feel that I need to remove myself from a really noisy, overstimulating site for a short period of time, is that something that's going to be feasible? And if so, what might that look like? Is there a quiet area that I can go to just regulate? Considering some of that overstimulation, it might be that actually you might choose to, eat on your own in the evenings rather than go out with the rest of the team. And that's absolutely fine. If you are peopled out by the end of that day, it's perfectly valid to do that. And so kind of building that confidence around having those conversations can be helpful.
You mentioned a while ago about it's not you have autism, you have ADHD, there's always a lot of overlap between. With that, do the perceptions or how it manifests itself conflict with each other? And I think you know what I mean, so I'll hand over to you.
Yeah. So in people who are autistic, there's a really high proportion of people who are also ADHD. The figures are slightly lower the other way around, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But a lot of autistic people also have a lot of ADHD traits. And you can't always tell when somebody's autistic. So it might be that somebody is the life and soul of the party, but actually they might find it really draining to be so. So they might need some time on their own to kind of recharge their batteries, that sort of thing. And sometimes for people who are ADHD, which is when people have autism and ADHD, it can feel like there's sort of two aspects of their personality pulling them in different directions. So it might be that one day you behave one way or you need, certain things, but the next day that could be completely different. And that can be really sort of conflicting for people. A lot of people who are ADHD do struggle a bit with their mental health because of, again, not necessarily understanding that about themselves and that feeling like you're almost pulled in two directions by two different parts of your personality. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And I think that, again, I think that's something people will resonate with. It's just triggered when you were talking about like the amount of overlap and how it manifests as somebody that's got autism, but in sometimes somebody that's got ADHD, it's the complete opposite. So you can have somebody that they want regulation, and that's the autism trait, but at the same time they need variety and they can't focus in on one thing for a really long period of time. The example you gave of they want a deadline, they want to stop and they want to go on to something else. Those two traits people will have those two exact traits and they conflict with each other. Yes,
absolutely. And that exact thing of the need for structure and routine, but also the need for novelty and for things not to be boring, and it is quite conflicting in a way.
But all goes back to that understanding and understanding yourself, not necessarily reading up about autism. That's where the diagnosis comes in, isn't it?
100%.
I'm interested to understand, Dom, and you touched on it a bit at the start, the work that you've been doing with On the Tools and what they're doing. Could just like to spend a little bit of time just maybe explaining that in a bit more detail, what the vision is and how you're bringing the tech in to help support.
So hopefully everyone is aware. A lot of people are aware of the work On the Tools do. One of the most powerful pieces of thought leadership I've ever seen was the one around mental health within the construction sector. How many people are sadly being affected by suicide, and they're just horrific stats. And we know the sector isn't doing enough, but I don't think we need to go into that today. But so you've got a mental health app that we were initially trying to sell into the construction sector because of how bad the stats were. So I reached out to Lee, said there must be a way of us kind of working together to get on wellbeing in the hands of as many construction workers as we can. And then Lee was like, well, we're actually thinking of building an app of our own. And basically, is there any way we can kind of do something together? And one of the main reasons, well, there's several reasons why I think mental health is so bad in the construction sector. It's no guaranteed work. It's because of how many people are self-employed. Probably things like the massive, the higher volumes of people with neurodiverse conditions, the costs, the salaries, etc., and all these things I think is leading or contributing to the mental health in the sector.
Yeah.
So basically, what we looked at doing was creating a blue light card, which, if you're not aware, it's a deals and discounts tool for people in the forces or in the blue light sector roles for the construction sector. So what the card is, it's going to be called On the Tools card. Hopefully by the time this comes out, it will be live. So what it basically is deals and discounts at construction specific retailers, at non-construction specific retailers, at well-known retailers that you can do your shopping at, that you can buy your fashion wear, etc., electronics, that you will be able to save money on to help you with the day-to-day living. Alongside that, we've basically got all the mental health and wellbeing content that is what our background to support every user that has access to the app. So it's super low cost. Users will be getting the money back on one purchase, basically, depending on what they're buying, and they get all the mental health and wellbeing support bundled into one. So yeah, we're super excited, and we are the support. Hopefully, will offer to everyone, regardless of what your organisation offers. Regardless if you're self-employed, you will get access to some behavioural science-backed mental health content that we've created, as well as getting saving hopefully a fortune on your day-to-day, your construction-specific purchases that you have to do as part of your role or as part of your day-to-day life, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a quick and easy way for people to get a financial benefit, but also an easy way to get access to more support. Like we said a couple of times on this, as starting point, whether it's mental health or that being the start of your journey to undiagnosed neurodiversity, is support and knowledge. And the more people can get access to it, the better, I would say. We're starting to come towards the end. So I've got a couple of quicker questions. There's one that I think you've kind of already answered, Sara, but I'm gonna ask it again, because I think just having it as a really clear message is important. So hopefully people have listened all the way through, and I would expect that there's quite a few people where there are things that we've talked about that sound I think that is all we have time for today. So, guys, I can't thank you enough. I think it's a complex subject to get into, but it's one personally I've been really passionate about doing a podcast on, because I don't think it's talked about, and I think there's a real link in between topics that we do talk about a lot around education and around mental health, and I feel like neurodiversity and the understanding of it straddles a lot of different things. And I think it's been brilliant to hear from you guys how it manifests itself, how you cope with it, how you can access tech and resources as an employer and as an individual. And I'm just really hopeful that this has helped people that are listening to take some of those first steps that we talked about. And I will just add that we will find a way, whether it's through our social channel, to get some of those resources signposted a little bit better. So there's links that you can follow in if you've listened along and things resonate. So guys, again, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening along. If you've enjoyed this episode, we do have a few more planned to cover off neurodiversity planned in the future. So please follow the Measure of Things on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and join the conversation on Instagram at STABILA_UK.